Good day, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Sound Archives. My name is Christian Maiorino, and I'm the host of this channel. So I'm recording this episode a day late than what I've been typically doing. Today is President's Day here in the United States, so a lot of us, including myself, have this day off from work. So I figured it'd be a good opportunity to record the video today since I had some other things to get taken care of over the weekend. So anyway, so this episode, as I mentioned in my previous video, is a review of the documentary Thin Lizzy, Outlawed, the Real Phil Lynott. So this is streaming on the Tubi service, which actually has quite a few really great rock documentaries and concert videos. I think more than what I've seen on other streaming services. So those are the types of things that you like to watch. And if you're watching this episode, I assume that you probably do. Definitely check it out if you haven't already seen what they have on there. Even the last concert video that I reviewed, the Rush Time Stand Still, was also one that's streaming on Tubi. So anyway, back to this one on Thin Lizzy. So this is actually an older one. It was produced back in 2006. And I'm guessing it looks like it was produced for TV, probably BBC or something over in the UK. I don't believe it was in the United States, since U.S. doesn't ever seem to really produce a lot of shows like this. Anyway, so it's a typical, kind of these made-for-TV documentaries where you have, you got your archival footage, interviews with band members and people that knew or that were connected with Phil Lynott and Thin Lizzy. And also you have a narrator throughout, kind of telling the whole story, documenting really Phil, his whole life from the time he was born, growing up, to getting to music, forming Thin Lizzy, their kind of rise to fame, and then sadly his untimely death. So there's quite a few people that are interviewed in this that were connected to him. You have Nick Tauber, who was a producer of a lot of those early Thin Lizzy albums. Eric Bell, who was the first guitar player in Thin Lizzy. He played on the first three albums. You had Brian Robertson, or Robbo, who who joined Thin Lizzy on the Fighting album. Not Fighting, the one before it, Nightlife. And then I believe he played up through Bad Reputation. He had Jim Fitzpatrick, who did a lot of the artwork for a lot of the Thin Lizzy albums, including that one right there, Johnny Fox. I think probably the most important interview that was on there was with Philomena Lynott, who's Phil's mom. Definitely, her interview is definitely one of the highlights in this. She recounted kind of the difficulties that she faced when Phil was born, 1949. One being an unmarried woman, and also having a black baby in Ireland was challenging, to say the least. They did, she struggled very early on trying to raise Phil. One of the stories she tells is going to a butcher, getting like a bag of bones and saying it was for the dog, boiling the bones and just eating that stew that would last them a couple of days. So, it's a very, kind of, I guess you could say, a rags to riches story, so to speak, that early beginning. But then, Phil getting into music, forming Thin Lizzy, and then, becoming this, popular band, and, eventually being able to buy his mom a house and everything. It's really heartwarming. Clearly he had, the film goes to great lengths, just showing the great talent and the great songwriter and musician that he really was. Sadly, it seems like Thin Lizzy, especially here in the United States, they're only known for kind of their biggest hit songs, Boys Are Back in Town and Jailbreak, which are both great songs, but, there's so much more to what Thin Lizzy, as far as the music that they put out. So many great songs, so many great albums. Another highlight of this is just a lot of the great archival footage they showed, and even the last tour that they did, the Thunder and Lightning one in '83, showed that they were as a live performer, as a live band, Thin Lizzy and Phil, they were still a powerhouse and still great. But yeah, going back to some of the tragedies, it was just sad that he seemed to have been taken from us so early. A lot of it stemmed from his his problems with drug abuse, and especially getting into, unfortunately getting addicted to heroin. The interview there with Phil's mom, talking about finding him in the bathtub, fully basically fully clothed and just like feeling sick. I guess he had contracted pneumonia, which eventually overtook his life. So it wasn't a direct drug overdose or that type of thing, but definitely those things did take a toll on his health. So it's really sad. So many great triumphs with their rising to fame with Thin Lizzy. So much great songwriting and all that, but then also the tragedy of the addiction and his untimely death. And you could see the interviews with the friend. I mean, even though this was back in 2006 or whatever, you could see that the all these people who were so close with him, not just his mom, but of course other bandmates and associates, friends, were still broken up by his loss, which was at this time 20 years after. And I'm sure these people are still pretty broken up by it, or at least those who are still with us, who are featured in this documentary. So and of course the film closes with the unveiling of Phil's statue in 2005 on Harry Street in Dublin. It's great to see that statue being erected to as someone like Phil Lynott. Usually these things are reserved for like war generals or something, but the fact that they did it for a rock musician is pretty cool. So anyone who's already kind of a big fan of Thin Lizzy, I would highly recommend watching this documentary. If you haven't already, probably not going to learn a whole lot that you don't already know, but you do get to kind of relive and recount those stories and get those those live performances and everything that were really great. For those who maybe aren't too familiar with Thin Lizzy or only know a little bit, I definitely recommend watching it to learn a little bit more about the history of the band, especially Phil Lynott. Of course, it doesn't just cover his time in Thin Lizzy; it also touches on points of some of the side projects that he was working on. The Greedy Bastards, which was kind of like a punk rock offshoot there, and then also Grand Slam, which had some other different musicians come in. And of course his solo career. He did in the 80s did release a couple of different solo albums, but of course his main vehicle always was Thin Lizzy. So definitely a great overall documentary. The only thing I wish that they could have had a little bit more. The film did open with an archival interview with the man himself, with Phil. I wish they could have included a little bit more of that, maybe that interview or other archival interviews with Phil. It's possible that there's really not that much out there, which wouldn't have given them a lot to work with. But if that was one thing that could have been included more, it was just more archival interviews with the man himself. But anyway, overall, it's a great documentary, a great story of Phil Lynott's life and career. And I guess that's pretty much it for today about this review. So if you like my review of this film, give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. So for next week, what I plan on doing is what's new in 22. I'm going to review some new releases that have come out so far. I've been listening to the new Voivod album that came out. Got a new Jethro Tull that came out, the new Tony Martin album, and there's a couple others that hopefully I'll get to by next week and talk about in my next video. So until then, this is the Sound Archives, sounding off.